Good morning. I'm Professor Roger Ho. I'm very honored to be invited to present in the today conference, Human Resilience and Adaptation, an Integrated Dynamic Psychosocial Ecological Life Course Approach. Today, my topic is on resilience and neurodiversity, why an accurate diagnosis for ADHD is important for adults. I am a professor in psychiatry, as well as a senior consultant psychiatrist. I'm from the Department of Psychological Medicine, Yong Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore. And I'm a chief graduate from University of Hong Kong. This is the overview of today's presentation. First, we will go through the prevalence of adult ADHD in the world and global challenges. Second, I will introduce you the latest diagnostic method for adult ADHD at the National University of Singapore. And we actually share with you how we perform our assessment, and we also go through a case. And lastly, we will share with you how to build up resilience in adults who suffer from ADHD. Now, ADHD is a common problem. There is a awareness, there's a global movement to enhance the diagnosis of ADHD, both in Singapore and Hong Kong. So we found that in this meta-analysis, they studied the global prevalence of adult ADHD. They have 21 data sets from all over the world, including Africa, America, Southeast Asia, Europe, Western Pacific, with 50,000 adults. In this large sample size meta-analysis, they found that the prevalence of persistent adult ADHD was 2.58%, and symptomatic ADHD was 6.76%. This translates to 140 million people who actually have persistent adult ADHD, as well as 366 million adults who have symptomatic ADHD in the world. Now, we look at this prevalence figure. This is a high prevalence. Hong Kong has spent a lot of resources on early psychosis of schizophrenia. The prevalence of schizophrenia is only 1%, but adult ADHD actually, if you talk about the confirmed disorder, is 2.58, symptom is 6.76%, which is much more common than schizophreniform psychosis. Now, you can see that the prevalence, or the number of cases, it actually reduced when people get older. I think that makes sense is because when people get older, the other condition will come in, will be the mild cognitive impairment or dementia. But today we focus on the management of adult ADHD. There are interesting facts about ADHD. In 1902, ADHD was first officially documented by English pediatricians. The estimate ADHD rates in Singapore, mainland China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan are from 4.9% to 6.5%. Okay, so ADHD is not a new phenomenon, and it was mentioned in a medical textbook back in 1775. And there are actually more than 100,000 articles on scientific journal articles on ADHD so far. Now, in our society, there's this concept called neurodiversity. And today, our conference is in Hong Kong, so some of the audience probably know this very popular group called ERA in Hong Kong. Now, I think the interesting about ERA, you can see that the members are from different height. You have 193, who actually is very tall, and also we have this guy, he called himself Fat Boy, is shorter. So we have people who are thin, tall, who are people fat and short. This is diversity. Now, in the world, there's a new movement in the workplace called neurodiversity. So people say, my attention is not as good as yours, but you still have to accept me because we are living in a society with neurodivergent people. Now, people with ADHD have the strengths, but need to overcome their deficit to build resilience. This is why an accurate diagnosis is important. And resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from the difficulties and toughness. Now, the challenge of diagnosing ADHD is not just in Singapore. These 4 questions also apply to Hong Kong. Question number 1 is, is clinical interview or online survey is this enough to make a diagnosis for ADHD? This was asked by patients. I'm an adult. Question number 2, why must I bring my parents to see a doctor for diagnosis of ADHD? Now, this requires some of the psychologists in Singapore. They ask your parents, they even ask a primary school report card. But to be honest, I myself don't keep my primary school report card with me. And the challenge about bringing a parents is that because of now we have this Personal Protection Data Protection Act, so sometimes the adult may not want the parents to see a doctor. The question number 3 is why ADHD assessment is so expensive and the waiting time is so long. Number 4 is beside clinical interview, do psychiatrists have other tools to diagnose ADHD? For example, a patient with chest pain, they will do an ECG. The psychiatrists have objective tools. Now, I think this also applies to Hong Kong, but in Singapore, we have retail psychiatrists, private psychiatrists. They're very supportive of diagnosis of ADHD, but they usually do an online survey. Sometimes they refer to a psychologist, but the patient may refuse because the assessment fee is quite high to be assessed by a clinical psychologist. Government hospital psychiatrists, they don't have the incentive because the private psychiatrists, each patient they see, they have extra income, but the government hospital psychiatrist is a fixed salary. They actually say, I'm not confident to diagnose ADHD, or I must have a child history. Give me a primary school report card. If you don't have a primary school report card with me, I cannot diagnose you. And the treatment of ADHD is a controlled drug, so some government hospital psychiatrists are concerned. Some public hospital psychiatrists say that the patient know the DSM-5 criteria pretty well. So they think they may make up for their diagnosis, and they say they don't have the resources and time. They're very concerned about the misuse of the ADHD medications. Okay, now, because of all this, at the National University of Singapore, we actually developed our latest technology to help to diagnose ADHD in a more objective way. This is called a functional near infrared spectroscopy, or FNIRS for short. Now, for audience here who are actually very familiar with fMRI, we actually the FNIRS is very similar to fMRI, but the only difference is that it's much cheaper. And as you see in the picture, the person when doing the scan is in a sitting position, not in a like a lying down position or in an MRI scanner. But they use the same method, is to use but they use the infrared light to detect the changes in the oxyhemoglobin level. So in psychiatrists, various disorders, we found that patients have lower oxyhemoglobin level. And for ADHD, the area that we're interested in is the frontal lobe. FNIRS is very affordable, but the only drawback is it doesn't go deep in the brain, but we just look at the cortex is good enough. So in NUS, we are using FNIRS to help us to diagnose ADHD and other psychiatric illness. Now, this is one of the studies published by my previous PhD student, Fabia Hussein. So in her PhD thesis, she actually do a case control study with 105 patients with major depressive disorder and 105 healthy controls. And then they do a test called the verbal fluency test. The verbal fluency test is one of the most sensitive tests, better than MBAC, to differentiate different psychiatric illness from healthy controls. So some of you who are maybe some psychology background, you may have heard about verbal fluency. In the English version is, if I start with letter A, you tell me as many words start with letter A, like apple, ant, aeroplane. Then we change to letter F. Then you may think of like Florence, flowers, etc. Now, when they generate words, the oxygen you see in the green line, which is represented by the healthy control, should go up in the frontal and temporal lobe. Frontal lobe will help them to pay attention, focus, and also think of the strategy. Temporal lobe is going to retrieve the words from the memory. But even you are not expert in analyzing FNIRS results, you can see there's a major differences between major depressive disorder and healthy control, and the oxyhemoglobin level is much lower in major depressive disorder. The sensitivity and specificity for these tests is about 75%. Now in psychiatry, nothing is 99% because back to the basics. We call this major depressive disorder, but you look at the symptoms. They have depression, they have attention problem, they have like cognitive bias. Maybe in nature, the classification is really different, but this is a human name-made classifications. So there's a lot of overlap of symptoms. Secondly, this is just based on F-nurse alone, but in our clinical setting, of course, we have questionnaire, we have clinical interview that will further enhance the sensitivity and specificity. You may ask, can F-nurse differentiate psychiatric disorder that have common symptoms? For example, there's a common condition called borderline personality disorder. They also present with unstable emotion, depression, and in one of channel 36 on the right frontal lobe, you can see that they can differentiate the healthy people, borderline personality disorder, and major depressive disorder, with the oxyhemoglobin level lowest in the major depressive disorder, middle in the borderline, and highest in the healthy control. Now, let's go back to ADHD. In NUS, we have actually completed our research. Today, I can't share with you the result because the paper is still under review. I will hope to share it with you later on, but let's present the other published result. They were published by the Japanese. Again, they used the verbal fluency test on a case control study with 63 drug-naive adults with ADHD and 38 healthy controls. Now, this is the demographic. These people are the middle-aged adults and around 30 years old. What they can find is that the adult with ADHD in Japan, they actually have a smaller activations in the brain compared to the healthy control. It's more on the left frontal lobe, okay? And also at the temporal lobes. So in the adult with ADHD, the Japanese study found that they actually have lower left frontal and temporal lobe functions, or low oxygen hemoglobin levels are being sent when they're performing the verbal fluency test, hence compared to healthy controls. So these are also interesting findings because we always think that ADHD have a low frontal lobe, but they also have a low temporal lobe functions. Actually, in my clinical experience, many adult ADHD say they have poor memory. As we know, temporal lobe is important for memory. Now, this is another study on children. This is a prospective study. They actually check the oxyhemoglobin level at baseline and 1.5 hours after they take the MPH, which is the methylphenidate, is the medication to treat ADHD. Now, they have a small sample size. As we all know, it's not easy to be good children. You have to get parental consent. The IQ is in the average range. They are doing a go and no-go test, which is more suitable for children. This is less language dependent. For example, if they show them different animal, if they say, oh, you see a lion, you press, the other animal, you don't press. So what they found is that after taking methylphenidate, there are certain channel 10 and channel 14 of the right lateral prefrontal cortex, there's an increase in oxyhemoglobin level after they take methylphenidate. Now, so it's very important because we proved that the pharmacological treatment do enhance the brain function. Back to today's topic, we talk about resilience. So a correct, accurate ADHD diagnosis lead to correct treatment, enhance brain function, can enhance the resilience of adult with ADHD. So how about our assessment service in NUS? Now, we are from the medical school. We always emphasize our research does not end with publication. Our research ends with translations. So the success of research is that at the end, we apply on the patient and it's a fee for service for sustainability. So now in Singapore, people pay for this service. We also welcome international patients from Hong Kong to consider coming to NUS for proper ADHD assessment. So the ADHD assessment, we start with consent. We actually have traditional tool like corner adult ADHD scale. We have DSM-5 interview. We have F-nurse assessment. Currently, we are doing the continuous performance test, but we also found that this test not too sensitive. Very soon, this test will be replaced by our eye tracker. So we know that adult ADHD cannot focus when they follow an eye movement. So we actually monitor the subtle abnormal eye movement to further enhance the accuracy of diagnosis ADHD. And we guarantee that to our patient, after 1.5 hour assessment, we will give them a 5-page report. So we're different from other surveys. They have to go home and wait for the report. We give a 5-page report immediately before they leave our assessment center. So, as I say, we have a lot of international patients coming to Singapore for ADHD assessment because currently our cost is quite affordable. We actually charge around like 400 Singapore dollar for assessment, so it's actually very affordable. And we have these international patients who come to Singapore, and then he cannot get his ADHD assessment in his home country, which is a Western country, because of long waiting time. So he actually have all the symptoms of ADHD, like he actually could not complete his tasks, very disorganized, he loses easily, he does not like to do tasks that require attention, can be distracted by other people at work, he cannot follow instruction, very forgetful. He also has hyperactivity symptoms, like he tries to avoid waiting for a long queue, he fidgets from time to time. He also mentioned that he can be impulsive, he can interfere other people's speech, and he had difficulty to sit still in class, and he could answer teacher question before the teacher could complete the question. So he fulfilled the 6 out of 9 DSM-5 criteria for inattention, as well as hyperactivity and impulsivity. So in the assessment, he is consistent based on corner because his inconsistency score is lower than 8, so he's consistent. And he have a quite high ADHD total score is 210. Based on my experience, I consider this as severe ADHD. And of course, we also look at T-score. Then he is not depressed. His ADHD also not because he has a borderline personality. He doesn't have any cognitive impairment. So he have a pure inattention, not because of depression or cognitive impairment. Then look at the T-score. Very high T-score, like 90, 89, 90. Because the average is 50, so in terms of inattention symptom, hyperactivity, ADHD symptom total is like 40 points above the average T-score. So he's a combined adult ADHD based on the DSM-5 and corner scales. Now this is his the FNS result. Now this is a healthy person result, and this is our client result. Now he is not the worst case, but you can see that the red line is much lower than the healthy adult. Red line represents the oxygen hemoglobin level. In fact, the cutoff for Singapore, based on our research, to differentiate adult ADHD and healthy control is 69 and 96 here. He's actually lower than the cutoff than our healthy control. So the F nurse also support that. He have a lower frontal lobe and temporal functions. So here, the F nurse also support diagnosis of ADHD. Now, so in this case, it's a clear case of ADHD because he fulfilled DSM criteria, corner scale says so, and then the FNS scan also support that. He belonged to the older group of our client. Now, actually, they will do the continued performance test. As I mentioned, very soon they will do our eye tracker device. So we have one more objective test to verify the diagnosis of ADHD, and then we give a report, his combined type, and he can bring the report back to his home country, or sometimes they actually seek help from me in Singapore for ADHD treatment. So I go to my last topic of today is how to build resilience after diagnosis of adult ADHD. Now, ADHD doesn't mean the person is hopeless. In fact, there are many famous people with ADHD. I think you all know many of these famous people in the world, they have ADHD and they make use of the strength of ADHD. One thing about ADHD is that they don't like to sit in the office. They are on the go all the time. They can be, sometimes they like to do multitask because their attention span is short. So they must do task A, task B at the same time. So one of the strengths is that people say they have hyperfocus. In fact, our FNS scan can see hyperfocus. When the oxyhemoglobin level rises to the peak in the beginning of the task or towards the end of the task, means the person has the ability to hyperfocus either in the beginning or the end. So So because they're hyper-focused, we ask them to do 2 tasks at one time rather than finish task A and then move to task B to make use of the hyper-focus. So as I said, many famous people have ADHD, very high flyer have ADHD because they're highly creative. They also build resilience. They are a bit of risk-taking also. They're very energetic. They have a spontaneous humor. They react fast. How to adopt resilience for adult ADHD? So you have to adopt a growth mindset. They have to write themselves in an affirmation journal and practice positive self-talk and about who they are and what they're accomplishing. They have to build confidence by keeping small promise, also small achievement to themselves. So, and then celebrate success with themselves and others. Adult ADHD, most of the cases I see, they're actually quite open about the condition. They share with their family members. So as I mentioned, you have to identify the strengths. So actually the strength and interest can be inspiring and also keep them going. So they have to write down their strengths and talent and start the day with a positive tone. So they have to achieve the target throughout the day. And then they also have to energize themselves. They also have to create a powerful feeling of accomplishment and increase their self-esteem. So they also have to consider other essential training. There are ADHD coaching in the world. I think Singapore is developing. I'm sure Hong Kong also developing ADHD coaching. Nowadays, because many psychologists can see online, we see a lot of cross-country consultation between client and psychologists from different countries. So they have practiced the area of focus. And also, as I mentioned earlier on, they have to create a journal for themselves or blog for themselves. They actually emphasize their strengths and their expertise. Now, step 2, they also have to modify the environment. ADHD needs structure and routine. So they may have to have a calendar, whether it's in their mobile device or more traditional, they have a routine or timetable. They need to set alarms because they cannot spend too much time on one task because they lose focus. They have to alternate tasks. They have to organize their work area. Many ADHD people are disorganized. They cannot find their things, so they will keep themselves organized, and then it will reduce losing the items, reduce distractors. I always ask this question because many people work from home during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we see there's a significant increase of number of adult ADHD after all the, we leave all the restrictive measure in Singapore. It's because they find it very tough to work from home because they're easily distracted at home. And they also need to try automation because they forget to pay the bill. So they must make sure that in Singapore, we call gyro. In Hong Kong, probably you have other terms that they deduct the money from bank account instead of asking them to pay the bill because they will forget. We have psychologists who do executive function training. So this is very important because they have usually lower executive functions. They can actually cause interpersonal conflicts, sometimes errors. So they should be very checklist. So they have to complete because they will forget the steps. They have meeting, they must have agenda. Otherwise, they also become very disorganized, and they have to break their tasks into smaller tasks. And because they make use of the hyper focus. Now, that's come to an end of my presentation today. Just a reminder, adult ADHD is a very common condition, much more common than early psychosis or schizophrenia. But unfortunately, there's not enough resources put into this area. Adult ADHD diagnosis is facing many challenges in the world, not only Singapore and Hong Kong. We hear about long waiting time, no objective test, and also there's some psychiatrists who actually dismiss this diagnosis. In Singapore, we use our functional near-infrared spectroscopy. It's a very novel, cost-effective neuroimaging to provide objective evidence along with DSM and Corner scale. So accurate diagnosis will lead to accurate treatment, both pharmacological and psychological. So based on our previous experience, an accurate diagnosis can inform a person and help to develop resilience related to ADHD, make use of hyper-focusing, adopting a growth mindset, strength-based pursuit, environmental motivation, and executive functioning training. So we hope that accurate diagnosis of ADHD, acceptable condition, and resilient building will help not just Hong Kong and the whole world to develop neurodivergent society. Now, if anyone is interested to contact me, whether to find out more about my research as well as our ADHD assessment in Singapore, please feel free to email me. I have my email at the bottom of the slide. I wish you a good day ahead.